Hello everybody, my name is Steven and welcome back to the Storytime channel. Without wasting any time, let's get into our stories of the day. My first job was a lesson in work to rule, a very obedient payback. I got hired on to my first job when I was 17. It was something of a fast food / coffee shop blend, and in my region, there are more of these chains than there are Starbucks chains. After a 10-minute interview and some paperwork, I was hired on. I would later find out that minors were the preferred hires at this location since it was likely their first job, and they might in turn be unfamiliar with labor laws. My mother makes a decent income going to work sites and dealing with on-site injuries, labor rights infractions, and so on. Her job is to make workplaces safer and spare them potential lawsuits. Through the stories she shared and the online handbook I devoured about labor rights in my region, I had a decent picture of how ethical workplaces operate. As it turns out, my new workplace was not so ethical. Your breaks were considered more of a privilege than a right, and you could be pulled out of your break to help up front at any time, with no opportunity to make up that break time later. I earned a great deal of scorn from my manager by asking for a 30-minute break on my 7-hour shift instead of a 15-minute one. Here, you are legally entitled to 30 minutes for every 5 hours worked. There were so many weird, corner-cutting things going on that could create a disaster scenario in terms of safety. Climbing on whatever is available instead of using the ladder was broken, poor food safety, and the occasional fire in the toaster oven because new hires weren't instructed on how to use it safely. Not much instruction on how to use the corrosive cleaners, and if you had to clean the oven in the back kitchen, you were lucky if you received an unused mask or PPE that wasn't damaged. Burns, rashes, sprained ankles, and cuts were not uncommon. I badly burned my arm with hot coffee and immediately went to treat it, then asked for the right forms to fill out to report on my injury. I was scolded for leaving the front end, told there were no forms, and informed that no one reports on burns anyway. If we reported every burn or slip and fall in a coffee shop, we'd never get through all the paperwork. The burn blistered with time and eventually required some prescription antibiotic cream from my physician. I was fed up, but intimidated at the thought of trying to formally report these people for safety and labor violations. Everyone else seemed to accept what was going on. I was trying to save money to move out, and in my head, the odds of getting hired elsewhere seemed slim. I decided to do something unconventional. I thought I was the first to come up with it at the time, but I would later find out that my plan was a classic workers' protest tactic. I was going to work to rule, following every policy to the exact letter, which would inevitably slow things down and create obstacles to efficiency. It started with the cappuccino machine and the iced drink machine. The cappuccino machine is to be cleaned once daily, and the iced drink machine is to be changed weekly. These are both lengthy processes that leave the machines out of commission for a while. No one did it regularly, and we had an issue in the past where we got complaints about the taste of the iced drinks, only to pop the top off the machines and discover some kind of filmy, moldy growth on the surface. Seemed like a good place to start. I took great cares to drain them and give the detachable parts a long soak and a thorough scrub. This angered customers who wanted their drinks right away. I'd been there for a while at this point and instructed anyone I trained not to hesitate to get the manager if their customer has an issue they can't resolve. And so it went that every shift involved me cleaning some machine and my manager placating impatient customers. We had this pre-prepared specialty tea that almost never got ordered, but nonetheless, it was policy to change the pot of tea every 30 minutes for freshness. No one did this, the tea would sit for hours. I decided this tea needed special attention and made sure I was changing it regularly. The result was that we went through our stock faster than we ever had before. We frequently ran out, and the stock orders had to be changed to accommodate a greater supply of the tea. I took cares to check our freshness dates on the prepackaged foods. If it was expired, it was trash. This pained me as I don't like to waste food, but we had a strict policy on freshness of product. I tried to wiggle on this, only throwing it out if it was 3+ days over. Nonetheless, the result was empty display cases, low stock, and a need to, again, adjust stock to accommodate for the food supply needs that come into play when policy is actually being followed. I was assigned the sandwich and soup station, perhaps in an effort to keep me away from other things. However, it was wonderful new territory to work to rule. I changed gloves after every order, as the handbook indicated we should. I took cares to clean out all the receptacles before putting new toppings in them. The handbook indicated we were supposed to cool vats of soup in ice baths to bring them to a safe temperature before storing them in the fridge. I made sure it was done, which was inconvenient to management when they could have had me working on something else before the shift was over. I kept abiding by the rules rigidly and to their fullest extent. Management was incredibly upset and communicated as much when I wasn't around. However, I had turned 18 by this point. I could now legally work past a certain time, supervise the teenage employees, and close the store. Until they hired on someone else who could work the hours I was working, it was something of a pickle for them. I also offered no hostility or indication I was being spiteful. If you were on the outside looking in, you might see me as an employee who did the jobs no one else wanted to do. It wouldn't have been easy to call me out to higher-ups. My coworkers, despite the inconveniences by proxy they probably had to put up with, didn't seem to mind. They were interested to see how it would play out and told me as much. I decided to quit after a conversation with the store owner herself. She indicated that she wasn't fond of kids who think they know how to run a business she's been running for years, and had some other choice words for me. I told her on the spot, "Oh, I understand completely. I'll submit my written notice for you tomorrow." My resignation letter was not just a resignation letter. The first few lines were as much. What followed was a list of safety infractions and labor law violations with dates and examples attached. It was incomplete since I only started recording these a few months in, yet it managed to be pretty extensive. I said something along the lines of, "I trust you will address these problems in a timely manner." There was a quiet implication in some of my other language that the Better Business Bureau, Health Inspector, and associated safety organizations in my region would be happy to help them out. I gave 2 weeks notice in the interests of my coworkers, who would have had to take extra shifts if I left abruptly. I was scheduled for 5 of the 14 days. They wanted me out, and they wanted me out as soon as they could get me out. I didn't return to this location for several months, even though I lived fairly close to it. I eventually got curious and went back to check things out. The place looked very different. You walked in, and it just felt cleaner. The employees looked happier, though I didn't see any familiar faces. The location had come under new ownership and had been completely turned around. I have no idea if I played a role in the store changing hands or getting fixed up. I only know that for several months, I was a relentless pain in the butt for quietly, obediently following the rules, and I left a letter in my wake that created unease. So if you were in this job and you knew that there were labor violations going on, what would you have done? Let me know in the comment section down below what your preferred course of action would have been. No, go ahead and fight me. A martial arts expert ruined by an 11-year-old girl. In the 6th grade, I bore witness to a stunning example of malicious compliance. Several grades of classes from our elementary school were called to the gymnasium for some lessons on self-defense. We were to be given some very rudimentary examples of how we, as children, can fight off an attacker if there are no other options. The instructor was a man who had a long martial artist title and was unbearably smug about it. Sure, he'd made some big accomplishments, but he would take every moment available to deliver his lengthy champion title verbatim. Darned if I can remember what it was. It might have been a willful effort on my part to erase it. He was instructing us on how to basically go belly up like a distressed turtle and kick off an attacker. We weren't really understanding how this was feasible, and we were asking a lot of questions about it. He got tired of the questions and called up a volunteer to demonstrate the self-defense technique. He called upon Alice, a girl in my class. He didn't just tell her how to get into that position, however. He was putting his hands on her and getting her to lie belly up on the waxed gymnasium floor, in a way that was truly creepy and invasive, even to children who might not understand why. He gave her long stares and made some quiet remarks to her that we couldn't hear, but the expression on her face said yuck. I was only 11 years old, but I got the gist of the situation and thought to myself, this guy is freaking gross. She had her legs up to kick, was making kicking motions but clearly swerving away from making direct hits to the man. It wasn't enough for him to just have the kids understand the technique. He needed to demonstrate his martial arts prowess. He said to her, "No, go ahead and fight me. This works on an amateur, but I'm a," insert his lengthy and proud title here. He could not have known, but my entire class knew, that Alice was a competitive swimmer. She had swimming skills beyond her years and all the medals and awards to prove it, complete with the muscular development of someone who has spent years mastering their sport, particularly in her legs. Alice seized the opportunity to fight off a man who was already throwing up some problematic indicators of his own predatory nature. She kicked him a few times, clipping a shin or a thigh as he artfully dodged her full-on attacks with a big grin on his face. She then triumphantly planted her sneaker directly into his crotch with a force that made both her and this man red in the face. He let out a strangled yelp before crumpling to the ground. He dry heaved a few times too. He was in medical distress and some adults rushed to get him help. To the children though, we just saw a guy get kicked in the balls by a kid, and that's comedy gold in elementary school. He was helped out of the gymnasium amid the roaring, belly-aching laughter of 100 plus children. Astoundingly enough, to me at least, Alice was facing punishment for what had happened. Detention was already assigned, suspension was up in the air. Thankfully, Alice's mother rose up with the fury of 1,000 women scorned after hearing Alice's testimony of events. Alice faced no suspension and, to my knowledge, did not attend any after-school detention sessions. For the rest of the school year, she was recognized as the ultimate boss and reigning queen of justice by testes. With this guy getting all handsy and just too close to this child, and also just kind of being overly gloaty and stuff, I think he got just desserts here. I was punished by malicious compliance. Reverse story. I am neither the performer nor the witness of the malicious compliance. I am the stupid customer here. I was at a school trip in a small town, and we had a free hour to walk around the railway station before boarding on train. I've decided to have a cup of coffee and a dessert. I was young, 15 years old, and dumb, and didn't know much about how small local cafes work. They had their menu at the register. Also, there was a showcase with various samples of desserts and cakes. And only one employee, cashier and waiter at the same time, a visibly bored middle-aged lady. I say, "Hi, can I have a cup of coffee and a piece of peach pie, please?" She says, "We don't have peach pies right now." I say, "But you have it in the showcase." She says, "Yes, but we don't have them, sorry." I say, "But there's a piece of pie right here." She says it's a showcase sample. Me, annoyed, "So, does that mean I can't have it?" She rolls her eyes, silently hands me the plate with a pie, makes me my coffee, I pay, I walk to the table, sit down and try to stab a fork into the pie. Turns out, they bake fresh pies regularly, but they don't replace display samples. And it's a common practice in my country. They don't serve them and replace them only when they start to look/smell bad. My piece must have been cut multiple pies ago, and it went completely dry. A solid piece of peach stone. I was crunching into a pie, pretending that that's what I wanted, and she was observing me, knowing exactly what I felt and tasted. Dead silence. And only the sound of crunch. Should have listened to her. Lesson learned, lady. I guess the lady working there wasn't having a good day or something, because I feel like they could have taken a second to explain it. It's not like it would have been a lot of work to explain. This is a display piece. It's been made a long time ago. It's not edible. Should have been easy enough to say, right? But with that being said, that's all the stories we have for today, so what I want to know is which of these stories was your personal favorite and why? Let me know in the comment section down below. And thank you all so very much for watching and listening to the Storytime channel. If you haven't yet, please consider subscribing and don't forget to turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. And as always, thank you all again so very much for watching and listening to the Storytime channel.